Okay, thank you guys for coming. This is Josh Campbell. He is one of our state specialists. He's going to talk to you today about small acreage success and beginning farming and rancher resources. So we'll let him have the floor, and we sure appreciate him talking to us today.
Hi, everyone. Can you hear me okay? All
Yes.
right. And can you see me right now?
Yep.
You see my slides?
Yes, we can. Do you want
Okay.
to put on presenter view for us?
Yeah, I will in just a moment.
Okay.
Let me put that into, okay. There you go. All right. Well, thank you, Hannah, for inviting me to come join you guys. And it looks like you got a really exciting series of classes in store for you today. Um, I would have loved to have been there with you in person. It was one of those days where I was supposed to be in two places at once. And thanks to the magic of technology, you can kind of do that these days. Um, I would much rather be there in Tulsa with you, but I had some things I had to take care of. So thank you, Hannah, for accommodating me via Zoom. Um, like she said, I am a new state specialist with OSU Extension. I was a county educator for a number of years in a similar role to Hannah. And about a month and a half ago, I stepped into a new extension specialist role called beginning farmer and rancher, small farm extension specialist. And so I don't know the background of each of you, but my hope today is just to kind of touch on a variety of things that might pique your interest and help you realize the kind of the some of the resources that are out there for further exploration as you think about your small acreage, whether that be something you're thinking about for hobby purposes, and whether you're right in town or out in the country, there are resources available to you. And then potentially maybe you're interested in exploring how you start a small business or some sort of small enterprise related to your small acreage or small farm. And so I'm going to touch on a lot of things, and some will be maybe more relevant than others, depending on your interest. But just know that there's a lot of resources out there, and you can stop me at any point. We can have a discussion on anything that really sticks out to you that you want to hone in on. Okay. If you hear the term beginning farmer or rancher, um, sometimes maybe you think of that as having to do with age or something like that, but the term beginning actually has nothing to do with age when it comes to the programs and the services that exist out there through OSU Extension and through the U.S. Department of Agriculture and others. Um, and in fact, the USDA and most of the support programs that exist for small acreage landowners and people who are interested in getting into farming for the very first time and in whatever capacity, um, it has to do actually with, have you owned or operated your agricultural enterprise, whether that be honeybees or cattle or whatever, anything in between, for 10 years or less. So it has nothing to do with your age. It has to do with the amount of time that you've been operating. And so that's the eligibility criteria for just about any of the programs and services and things that you'll find out there to support you as you get started with small acreage activities. Of course, you're at a county extension office, so you know that county extension offices have a lot of programs and services. One of my goals is to begin to aggregate a lot of the resources that we do have in the form of fact sheets and videos and classes and things into kind of a unified space where people can access it. We have a lot of really good resources, but sometimes it's not always right at your fingertips in the way that you want it. And so I'm going to try to work on some of that. So not only is the county extension office a good place to start, but of course there are other agencies that serve beginning farmers and ranchers and small acreage landowners. And the USDA has some special assistance programs for beginning farmers and ranchers, and then other allied agencies even as well are supporting beginning farmers and ranchers. And so there's a host of resources that are out there. One of the things that I would encourage you to do as you think about um, exploring some of your interest in this area is to connect with the various agencies that are out there and get on as many email lists and things that you can. So I know Hannah is probably going to be starting an email list, and there are others out there. I'll be starting one on our Beginning Farmer website that I'll show you in just a minute. And then there are other resources that I'll share with you, which will be great places to connect, and you stay in the know about some of the services and programs that exist. One of the first questions I often get when people connect with me is they say something along the lines of, I hear that Extension, or I hear that the USDA or the State Department of Agriculture has grants for people who want to get started in farming. And yes, that's true. There are plenty of free resources to support people in the form of grants and other information. But the primary role of the USDA and a lot of these agencies, the Natural Resource Conservation Service, the Farm Service Agency, is to help people develop small farm businesses. And so there's definitely an interest in supporting people, whether you're on a half acre in the city or on several acres out in suburban or rural Oklahoma, in being successful with your small acreage and having all that comes along with that, kind of managing your hobby and those types of things. But what they really love to see is people taking those hobbies and turning them into some small businesses where they can realize some income. And so these agencies are there to support that, and they do offer some grant funding. So see if I can do my laser pointer here. So ODAF, the Oklahoma Department of Agriculture, Food and Forestry, has some existing grant programs. Many of them are eligible for beginning farmers and ranchers. They have one specifically. It's currently paused, but when it does open back up, it is specifically for new and beginning farmers. So you can apply with really no prior experience, and you can get up to $10,000 worth of grant funding to support a project or an idea on your small acreage or small farm. And then they will also offer some 0% loan programs as well. The more traditional services for small acreage landowners, beginning farmers and ranchers, come through Farm Services Agency. And the Farm Services Agency, I kind of like to explain that to people as the front door of all of the USDA services. There are, I believe, 36 different agencies that are made up that are under the USDA. So the USDA is made up of 36 different kind of departments. You could understand that as kind of different departments. But the Farm Services Agency is kind of the front door. If you want to be eligible for any of the grant programs, the loan programs, other cost share programs and services that are available, you actually have to register with the Farm Services Agency and have a farm number. And so the Farm Services Agency is a great place to start. Get a farm number. And you can have a farm number on a piece of property that you own. You can have one on one that you borrow or lease. And you can have a farm number on a parcel that's a tiny quarter-acre lot in urban Tulsa or hundreds of acres. So it's not exclusive to whether you own the land or whether you lease the land or how big the size of land is. It's just connecting. I kind of describe it as like setting up a social security number for your plot of land so that they can have a clear identifier that connects you and the place that you're growing with the services and activities that you're involved in. There are a number of other agencies and loan providers. So you'll find kind of some allied agencies like Farm Credit, who are going to kind of be support lending for the Farm Services Agency, and other lenders that will also provide services. And so the nice thing about the loans that are available through the Farm Services Agency and allied groups like Farm Credit is that they are heavily subsidized or reduced. So the market rate for financing that you would get from a traditional bank or something, if you wanted to start a business or buy a home or whatever, it's going to be substantially lower than that. Historically, rates have been somewhere in the 1 to 5% interest rate. You really see them hang out in that range. And so in an environment like today where interest rates are considerably higher than that, it's helpful. Okay. So if you do go looking through some of these programs that the USDA offers, you can go to farmers.gov. And on farmers.gov, there's a really easy to navigate website. They have the ability to look through kind of nationwide specific programs. You can actually go state by state and look at information. But you can now, since the pandemic, they really improved a lot of these online tools, but you can actually go and start the process of your farm service agency number, your FSA number online. And so you can go to farmers.gov, start an account, and start a lot of those processes online. They also have farm loan assistance tools that will help you determine kind of which loans you qualify for, which ones are best suited for you. And so that's a really neat tool because it's just kind of like something you can play with to determine your eligibility and what potential financing and interest rates you could access if you wanted. And so that's something I would encourage you to play with. There are a number of microloan and beginning farmer loan programs. And so for folks that are on small acreages looking to maybe invest in their property in some way, there's financing that could support that. And they have loans that are what they call farm ownership loans. So if you meet certain eligibility requirements, they'll actually fund the purchase of farmland for you. And so the acquisition of farmland, and so that's a farm ownership loan. Then there's operating type financing where you can get support to invest in infrastructure, like putting in wells or putting in fences or buying cattle or honeybees or any of the things that you would want to do that would go into developing your small acreage operation. So all of those tools and resources can kind of be accessed there, and you can learn more about them. It's also good to always have a relationship with your local FSA offices because those are the ones who will actually push forward the paperwork on your behalf. And so, depending on the county your property is in, that will determine which FSA office you work with. And typically, an FSA office serves about 2 to 4 counties, depending on the location. And so, I'm not sure if Tulsa County has their own office or if they have to go to. You do have your own office. Okay. So you have an office there that supports you. Like in where I'm at in central Oklahoma, we have to go to Kingfisher. So it's about a 30-minute drive, but it's usually never more than a 30-minute drive to your local FSA office. Okay, some other tools that you'll find on this website, you'll find kind of some 1, 2, 3 steps for, hey, I want to start a small farm business. What do I need to get started? Of course, there's going to be some nuances to location and state, but in general, you need a business plan of some kind. If you walk into an FSA office or any financing or even a lot of the grant programs will ask for some sort of basic business plan, a 1-page, 2-page business plan that describes what your activities are. Is it, I want to make some soap, sell it at farmers market. I want to raise some bees and collect honey and sell that at farmers market. Or I'm trying to buy 60 head of cattle and I'm starting a small ranch. Whatever it is, you need some sort of basic plan that will guide how you move forward. The service centers that I talked to you about, the FSA offices are good at helping you with some of that. And so you'll need a business plan and an idea of what you want to do. You'll need a marketing plan, and you'll need a plan for how you sustain your operation. So there's some resources available in all of those areas, and that's also where OSU Extension can really help you. So we have services that can help you develop business plans, and also think about some of the economics that go into an idea that you might have. So Dr. Courtney Burr, who is our farm management state specialist, has developed some new enterprise budgets, what we call enterprise budgets for small scale egg production, small scale meat production for chickens, for honeybees, for a number of small acreage type activities that kind of help you put an economic lens to that and say, okay, how do I make sense of this in order to build a small business concept around it? And so if you're interested in some of those resources, I'll show you some of those later, but just know that OSU Extension has a lot of those resources available for you. I just built a new beginning farmer and rancher page. Um, it is a kind of a bare bones right now. There will be some continued resources added to this as I build out our program. But this will be where I house a lot of the information for small acreage, new and beginning farmer content. Um, I am currently in the process of putting together some long-term plans for some beginning farmer rancher boot camp programs, kind of short course programs, and some other, like maybe some webinar series and some things that will really serve beginning farmers across the state. And so this website would be a good place to go and access some of that content. And it's not up there yet, but I will have a sign up for beginning farmer email list kind of button that will allow you to sign up for um, an email list that I'll have. And we'll keep you up to date with OSU Extension information. Right now, you'll find kind of a number of fact sheets for beginning farmer small acreage. So there's some information on how you fund your operation and accessing grants and loans. And then there's just some general information on where do you even get started? How do you form a business? How do you decide what type of business formation is best for your small acreage operation? Maybe you don't want to do that at all. Maybe you're just looking at it as a hobby, and what are other resources and things that you might have to pay attention to, um, like certain rules and regulations in your area. And so those resources are there. We also have a number of online classes. Our online class portfolio is growing all the time, and there's some really great resources, everything from Quicken for farm and ranch record keeping to small scale market gardening for sale at farmers market. We have a whole series of classes on that. We have a beekeeping class, a backyard chickens course. So a number of courses that would be really helpful to you that are all available through our beginning farmer rancher webpage. And then there's also a events and programs and manuals section that kind of highlights some of the upcoming activities that might be helpful to you. So Women in Ag Conference, our Meat Goat Boot Camp, Cow Calf Boot Camps, et cetera. And so some of those resources are going to be housed there. These are just two examples of the many fact sheets that we have. We have so many resources that support small acreage, whether you're interested in grazing and raising horses, or you're interested in anything and everything along that spectrum. There are resources. And so I just kind of highlighted two here. But if you go to our fact sheet website, OSU has a really good web page where you can search, and you can use that search bar by topic and type in and find and print any of our fact sheets. And so, of course, Hannah can help you access those as well. But if you're, let's say you're like me, and you pop out of bed at midnight and you're thinking about, your projects that you have going on, and you have something you want to research, it's an easy way to go and say, hey, what resources does OSU have in this topic? And so I encourage you to go look those up. Thousands of fact sheets that we have on a variety of topics, many of pertinence to small acreage. Here are some of the examples that we have of our backyard course, not our backyard, our online courses. So we do have a backyard chickens course that I helped develop, and it goes through everything from kind of raising chickens in a suburban kind of backyard type scale, all the way up to if you want to make a small business selling eggs and or even raising birds for meat. And so we cover some of those topics in this course. Our beekeeping course is also excellent. It covers a lot of the equipment that you would need, and some of the costs associated with getting started with beekeeping for the very first time. So a lot of that's covered there. Maybe you're just interested in kind of backyard wildlife, and your small acreage, you're interested in learning more about what are the good and the bad, or if you've got damage and you're trying to understand maybe what caused this damage on my property, or how do I mitigate this type of wildlife damage on my vegetable garden or on my flower gardens. There's a lot of great resources here. So I think we've got, 20 or 30 different classes, and more are being added all the time. And so it's a great resource for you. Here's some other examples. Introduction to beef cattle nutrition, livestock risk protection, farm and ranch record keeping, all classes that are there online for you. What I love about these classes too is that they're self-paced. So you can log on, and you can take them at your own pace and move through them, and your progress is saved. So instead of just having to like sit in one sitting and take a class, you can do it, in the evening or in the weekends or as you have time. Your progress is saved, and you move through in videos and different kind of interactive elements through the course in your own manner. Here's some of the examples of the market garden courses we have. There's, I think, 6 or 8 in the series, and so these are just some of those examples that would be there on that online course. If you're interested in, say, like a home baking type of operation, or making soaps or candles or things like that, Oklahoma has the Homemade Food Freedom Act. And so with that has come a lot of interest in people developing their own kind of small hobby businesses. Maybe they're making some soaps or some lotions or candles or lip balms, whatever, canned goods. And so these courses here that are offered by our Food and Ag Products Center walk you through some of the logistical hurdles and some of the potential safety concerns and labeling and things like that that would go into starting a little business like that. You might be familiar with the Oklahoma Local Ag Collaborative. It is a resource that was put together by a number of different agencies. ONI, the Oklahoma Nutrition, forget what the acronym is, but they're involved with a lot of the Fresh RX type food as medicine programs and SNAP and EBT benefits. And so they work with a lot of farmers markets and helping them get set up for accepting those benefits. Well, they have organized, in conjunction with the state of Oklahoma, Department of Agriculture, Food and Forestry, and some other agencies, have organized this Oklahoma Local Ag Collaborative. And you can create a profile on there for free. They put a free conference on every year, and it rotates between Tulsa and Oklahoma City. So it happened about a week or two ago in Edmond this year. So it should be in Northeast Oklahoma next year. And it's a great resource for anybody who is interested in kind of small scale agriculture, food production, farmers markets, local food, that kind of stuff. And really great resource. You can actually go to the website, and they put on not only a state conference every year, but we, as a collective, the agencies involved, put on a program, a 1-day kind of conference for free in each of the regions of the state. So there's usually a central region, southeast, southwest, northwest, and northeast. And so some really great events and classes that come through that. And what I love most about this website is their resources page. So they have this olac.org/resources, where you can find information about agritourism or resources for beginning farmers, community building and outreach. You name it, there are resources there that they are aggregating from all the different agencies across the state that are involved in supporting small acreage and new and beginning farmers. And so I encourage you to go to that website and kind of browse through some of those resources that they have to see what might be pertinent to you. This is an example of the calendar. So they also aggregate events from all different agencies. So OSU Extension being one of them, but they'll aggregate a lot of different events on their calendars to so that you can kind of see a variety of different programs that are being offered around the state. While I definitely encourage you to start with OSU Extension, I will also say that a lot of other extension services have great resources when it comes to small farm things. And so anytime you go to the internet, to the Google machine, and you type in a topic, if you put extension with that search, you'll find that it'll take you to resources that are going to be research based, based in they're going to be evidence based, and so you're going to get, in my opinion, the best information than some of the things you might find if you just do a generic Google search. And so I always encourage you, if you're not finding what you want with OSU Extension or local resources, to search a little bit more broadly. And so this is just an example of a cool web page with a lot of great resources that the University of California Extension has. Number of videos and helpful tabs on different topics. And so something for you to consider there as you search for resources. Honeybees and beekeeping has been a topic that I would say a lot of interest has been growing around this in Oklahoma, and we are investing in this, as is Langston University. So Langston University just recently hired a beekeeping specialist who will start doing some work around the state, doing some educational programs. If you're interested in learning more about bees, I would say you can plug into your local beekeeping associations. In Central Oklahoma, we have the Central Oklahoma Beekeepers Association. There would be a similar group in the Tulsa area. And we have a number of resources through our OSU Extension fact sheets and videos, as well as an online course. And so check those resources out if you're interested in beekeeping, and look for some programming that we'll have coming up across the state in 2024. So here are some examples of some of the fact sheets and resources that we have. I really like these resources because like the one you see here, this is beekeeping honey harvesting methods, cost, and break-even calculations. And so you get a good sense of how to actually think about this as in terms of profitability and small business. This one here talks about the resources, or the equipment that you would need to get started. So it kind of breaks down every piece of equipment that you need to get started with beekeeping, what it costs to do that. And so really, really helpful for new beekeepers. You're probably familiar with Oklahoma gardening if you've spent much time around OSU Extension. It is the longest running gardening television show that in history, I'm told. It's the longest one I know of. And they claim to be the longest consecutive running garden show in history. It's been running consecutively since 1973, I believe, or 75. Current host Casey Hinches is the 10th host, and she has a lot of great. She's introduced a lot of great information on gardening, beekeeping, small acreage topics. And so I'd encourage you to check out their YouTube pages. They have all of the segments are cataloged there. And so a 30-minute episode that airs on PBS on Saturday mornings at 11 a.m. and Sundays at 3 p.m. is broken down by topic. And you can actually search the YouTube page on the right-hand side there. You can actually search, and don't search the main YouTube search bar, but the right-hand side of the page internal to the channel, you can search by topic and type in small acreage or beekeeping or whatever the topic is of interest to you, and it will actually populate with videos from the YouTube channel that are specific to your search term. And so use that for a resource. Now I'm going to kind of talk about some of the different things that might be of interest to you, and kind of focus in a little bit more on some of the resources. Backyard flock production is certainly an increasing interest for small acreage landowners. And roughly 8% of all U.S. households raise backyard chickens in some capacity. And it's interesting, 93% of the top 150 U.S. cities by population allow backyard chickens. And until recently, about a year ago, Oklahoma City changed their ordinances to allow backyard chickens, but I was told they were the largest city in the country to not allow chickens. And so like cities like New York City and Philadelphia and a lot of much larger cities had ordinances that allowed backyard chickens, and Oklahoma City until about a year ago didn't. I've actually received calls from realtor.com and Zillow and places like that asking questions about backyard chicken ordinances, because it is in suburban and urban areas, in kind of peri-urban areas around cities like Tulsa, Oklahoma City. Ordinances that are friendly to things like backyard chickens or beekeeping are selling points for homes, and so they like to tout people's ability to raise backyard chickens or other friendly ordinances. I'm not sure if any of you have an interest in raising eggs or if you have any experience with it, but we'll talk a little bit about egg production and some of the laws around that. There's a great resource called Bringing Farm to Market that ODAF put out. You can just do a Google search for ODAF egg laws or Bringing Farm to Market, and it'll come up. And they've got some resources that are really helpful for understanding what the rules are associated with selling eggs. So I encourage you to check out those resources. But in a nutshell, we also cover it in our fact sheet, and this is really helpful, a guide to marketing locally produced eggs in Oklahoma. So something to look into if you have interest in that. Oklahoma has adopted the USDA law when it comes to, or the USDA guidelines when it comes to off-farm sales. So if you are producing eggs for your own consumption, or you're going to sell them to friends, family, people that come to your property, then you're not subject to any law. You can sell them ungraded. You don't have to wash them. You don't have to pay an annual licensing fee. But the moment you take them off your property to sell at farmers market or to distribute, say at church or some sort of swap or flea market or whatever you are doing to distribute them and sell them off of your farm property, you are supposed to buy a $50 yearly license. And you're also supposed to follow the guidelines of the state of Oklahoma, which include washing those eggs, storing them between 33 and 45 degrees Fahrenheit. So they have to be refrigerated, and they have to be dated from 45 days, best by 45 days from the date you pack them. So you have to put an expiration date on them that's 45 days from the date that you harvest them. And you have to have some sort of label that puts your name or your farm's name or your farm business's name and address and contact information on the carton of eggs. So that is state law. I see a lot of times people will take their home eggs and they'll maybe take them off farm and sell them to friends. Technically, that's illegal. It's on farm sales, farm gate sales that are not subject to state law. Anything where those eggs leave the property would be subject to state law. But there's some great resources that go further into that. The USDA egg manual is a kind of an overwhelming resource, but if you're really interested, it's there and something you could look into that kind of goes into some of those laws. You are supposed to grade the eggs, and so if you're going to be selling off farm, grading eggs will be important, and those resources also cover how to do that. But essentially, so that you understand, egg grading is about measuring the size of the air cell in that egg. And so you'll candle it and you'll measure the air cell and grade them out accordingly. For many small acreage backyard producers, we hear that people prefer not to wash their eggs. And I spent some time in New Zealand, and the first time I walked in the grocery store when I was there, it kind of blew my mind because all of the eggs were not refrigerated and they were just kind of on a shelf in the store next to the bread. And it's because they follow more of the European method, which is not washing the eggs. Here in the United States, our eggs are washed, which means that they have to be refrigerated, and they have a shorter shelf life because of that. However, they're not as likely to carry pathogens and diseases. And so for food safety purposes, that's why washing is considered important. And so again, things that you should consider if you are wanting to sell eggs, you should also look with your local health department for some specific licenses and things that might be required to sell at specific farmers markets or at specific settings. The 2-pan wash method is what's required here in Oklahoma. So essentially, you've got 2 pans of water. You got hot soapy water on the first pan. Then the second one would be water with a little bit of bleach, 1/4 teaspoon of bleach for every gallon of water. And so you dip in the first pan, dip in the second pan, wipe the egg clean, and let it dry, and pack it according to the state rules that guide that. Meat laws in Oklahoma are also sometimes a really confusing thing for small acreage people to navigate. And so I'm just going to, in a kind of fly over and explain some of the basics of that in case you have some interest. And then we have resources that provide more in-depth information if needed. But essentially in Oklahoma, when it comes to meat, you have three options. You can, in some cases, do on-farm processing. You process on-farm. You use that for your own consumption or for sharing with friends and family. Um, and then there's what's called state inspection and federal inspection. Anytime the meat, just like the eggs, anytime the meat is going to be leaving your property and sold at farmers market, sold to restaurants, taken off your property, and somebody's not coming to your home or your small acreage and buying it from you there on that site, you are subject to having to have those animals processed at a state or federally inspected facility. And so option one would be if you want to just process on farm. And let's talk specifically about poultry. You are allowed to process up to 1,000 chickens on farm in Oklahoma, and you can process up to 250 turkeys on farm in Oklahoma and sell them from your farm before you're really subject to some of the regulations. So here, this picture here is a picture of a friend of mine. He used to raise pasture poultry, and we would harvest on farm, harvest his chickens every year, and so just an example of that. If you decide you want to sell at farmers market or you want to sell to a local restaurant or something like that, you need to find a state inspected facility, and there are a few state inspected facilities around. They'll charge you a fee for processing the birds, and they actually have a state of Oklahoma Department of Agriculture, Food and Safety Division specialist on site semi-regularly inspecting the facility and making sure they're following certain safety guidelines. And so that's what's required at a minimum to sell within the state of Oklahoma. If you're going to have a business, let's say you live in northeastern Oklahoma and maybe your market bleeds over into northwest Arkansas or southern Kansas or something like that. Anytime you're going to be selling products that would be packed and shipped and or sold across state lines, you actually are going to be subject to federal inspection regulations. And so there is no, to my knowledge, no federally inspected facility in the state of Oklahoma that will process poultry. So most people who are doing pasture poultry or trying to get into raising meat birds are going to have to go to Kansas or Arkansas to have their birds processed. So that's a challenge here in Oklahoma, but just something to be aware of. If you have interest in trying to start a small poultry meat or egg operation, you can reach out through Extension to Hannah, to me, but the clarification on the rules and the laws that guide that here in Oklahoma can be directed to these two individuals here. And so Brian Buckwald is Oklahoma Department of Agriculture, Food and Forestry egg person, and then Scott Yates would be over meat. And so any specific questions that you have about how you might get into or navigate some of those rules that the state has for those types of activities would be directed to them. We have a really good set of videos on backyard chickens as well. So like I said, Oklahoma Gardening before, you can search internally and search for backyard chickens or any topic of interest to you. And there's a number of really fun videos, helpful videos on backyard flock. So I would check those out. We also have a website. So if you go to the OSU Extension website, extension.okstate.edu, and you click on this third tab here, Programs and Services, there's an alphabetized list of any of the programs that we have. So Beginning Farmer and Rancher website that I mentioned earlier would be on there. Backyard poultry, beekeeping, all of those programs and services web pages are there. And then you would just click on the one of interest to you, and it would bring you to the webpage. So the backyard poultry webpage, again, has a kind of an organization of all the eggs and backyard poultry fact sheets and some videos, and kind of curates that content there for you. And so that's something to check out. Okay, I'd like to talk a little bit about water as well. Water and water resources can be one of the biggest challenges for people as they think about um, managing their small acreage, whether it be for livestock or for producing vegetables, flower beds, whatever it is. Water can be a challenge. If you live in a setting where you pay for water, you've got that expense, right? It's expensive to use and pay for water for vegetable production. If you live in an area where you have groundwater, you maybe have the cost of installing that well, or you've got the cost of upkeeping that aging infrastructure if it's an older well. And so there's always challenges associated with water. So water is important in a crop and pasture setting because it's required for plant growth and photosynthesis and transport of nutrients. And it's also how plants cool themselves when conditions are hot. For animal and livestock purposes, it's also the primary way that we digest feed. So, in a livestock setting, they can go without food for a lot longer than they can without water. And so water is critical when it comes to gardening or to raising livestock. And it's something that you should certainly think about before you go and just invest a bunch of money in a small acreage, dream property, is thinking about the water resources that are there before you make some sort of big land purchase. When it comes to crop production, moisture deficiency is a big challenge. And so not having enough water can cause all sorts of issues in crops. But I think something that people don't think about very often is not only is the availability of water something you need to think about, but the quality of water is something we need to think about. And so I've dealt with a number of small growers who, they buy their small acreage property, they're trying to grow fruits, vegetables, whatever it may be, and they're encountering lots of issues, and they come to find out that their water quality is really bad. Maybe their pH is off, or they have high salt water, and those create challenges that are very hard to overcome when it comes to using that water to grow vegetables. And so things that should certainly be thought about and factored into any decision when it comes to your small acreage. I touched on this. Livestock are going to need water. And so really thinking about your ponds, access to water when you are thinking about developing a property for purposes of raising livestock. I mentioned earlier the Natural Resource Conservation Service. Once you have established relationship with the Farm Services Agency and gotten your Farm Service number, there are a number of programs and services that you might be eligible for. And the Natural Resource Conservation Service and the conservation districts do things like help you think about pond management and pond establishment, pond building, water resources, those types of things. And so some services that you could look into if you are in need of that. OSU Extension provides water and soil testing. And so many people are familiar with our soil testing services, but maybe less familiar with our water testing services. We can test water quality to help you determine, whether it's suitable for livestock purposes or for irrigation and garden purposes. So this is just some example information of what we could offer you in terms of information about livestock water quality. So we can tell you whether it's safe for consumption of animals, whether it's unsafe. We can determine what areas where there might be too much or some sort of contamination that needs to be addressed. When we think about water quality, the two most important measures for determining water quality are the dissolved solids in the water and then the sodium. And so just things to think about. And we have a really good fact sheet called Understanding Irrigation Water Quality. So if you ever do a water test with us, or you're considering doing a water test, whether it be your home drinking water or your irrigation water that you put out on your plants, or water maybe that you're intending for livestock purposes, that will provide some good details and information for you. If you do decide to do a water sample, essentially we just need a clean container. This says 4 ounces. I would say that would be at a minimum. Probably we actually need somewhere between 6 and 10 ounces for the sample. So collect a jar, mason jar, plastic bottle, whatever it is of water, and bring that to us. And we can test that for you. And I believe it's $18 currently for the water testing. Yeah, here you go. So we test household drinking water, livestock drinking water, irrigation water, and some others as well. We do a home brewer test if you're interested in making beer, wine, or things like that at home. We provide that service for you. Just some examples of the fact sheets we have on water quality. So again, just remember, you can go to the fact sheet website. You can search by topic anything that you're interested in, whether it be water quality, water testing, backyard chickens, egg production, you name it. The resources are there and really helpful. Sometimes we get people asking about urban agriculture, and I know that for some, maybe there's that definition is fuzzy. What's urban? What's suburban? What's rural? There isn't really a standard definition of urban agriculture, but in general, it involves food production and animal husbandry in and around cities. And so, of course, urban in Oklahoma is going to look different than urban, say, in New York City, or even Texas, where the Houston metro population is larger than the state of Oklahoma's entire population, right? And so urban is going to look different place to place. And there's some difficulty associated with defining what urban agriculture looks like. So when you talk to the USDA or other support agencies about urban agriculture, generally urban is now becoming synonymous with small acreage, right? So if you're on 1 or 2 or 3 acres, that's essentially kind of understood as the same as urban. But when we define urban specifically, you can look at U.S. Census codes, metropolitan statistical areas. And so this is a map of the United States that shows urban and rural areas. So urban statistical areas are in green, and then the rural are in kind of the lighter colors there. And one thing I like to point out is that over half of the U.S. population lives in a community of 500,000 people or greater. And by 2050, we're expected to have 3 in every 4 people in the United States will live in an urban setting. And so when we think about food production in and around cities, I think it's something that we need to be aware of, and we need to be preparing people to be more comfortable with how they might produce food on a small acreage. The USDA does define urban agriculture to some degree, and they say that it is cultivation, processing, distribution of agricultural products in urban and suburban areas, including rooftop gardens, aquaponics, hydroponics, and community gardens. So again, a very broad definition that they use, but generally any sort of agricultural, land management, livestock activity that happens where there's a congregation of people in an urban setting. So the USDA does have some new resources and some funding programs for urban agriculture specifically. They have some grant programs for urban agriculture and for composting. There's a program called the Urban Agriculture Innovation Program that it's available. It's a funding that's available for community organizations and nonprofits that are doing urban agriculture projects, whether it be a community garden or some sort of small farm operation, you name it. If it falls under that umbrella of urban agriculture and innovative food production in urban settings, then you could look into that as a potential funding source for your activity. They also have a Urban Ag Toolkit, which kind of helps connect to some of the problems that you might experience as a small farmer, small acreage landowner in and around an urban setting, and how you overcome some of those challenges. And so this is a screen clip from that Urban Ag Toolkit. You can do a Google search and find it. But they suggest that there are kind of 7 main challenges that somebody has to overcome if they're going to be successful on a small acreage urban agriculture type of operation. So if you want to start an urban farm, or you want to build a business around a small urban food production type of concept, you need to address these 7 areas. And so they've got business planning, land access, soil quality, water access, capital and financing, infrastructure, market development. And with each of those, they offer some resources. And so in that toolkit, there's actually some hyperlinked resources that connect you to different really helpful tools for each one of those categories. This is just some examples of some of the urban agriculture in Oklahoma City, and Tulsa probably has as much or more going on. I know that Tulsa does. And so when you think about food production and small acreage production, agriculture in and around cities, these are just some of the examples of things that are going on and that you maybe are interested in doing. And so there are other people that are successfully doing it, and there are support resources both at OSU Extension and at the state and federal levels as well to help you be successful in that. Again, just some other pictures of things that I've been a part of in Oklahoma City. One of the major challenges I think people encounter, again, is this goes with the concept of water, is how you set up and irrigate crops. And so we have some great resources on drip irrigation and managing vegetable crops irrigation as well. Some really great YouTube videos through Oklahoma Gardening and some helpful fact sheets if you are looking to get into some sort of vegetable production at scale where you need to irrigate in some similar manner. Yeah, again, just some examples of what that might look like. And signs of overwatering and underwatering. So if you're into vegetables, you're looking to produce vegetables, water management, again, is going to be very important. And so one of the things I always like to remind people or suggest to people is that they go and they look at, in the middle of the summer months when it's really, really hot, they look at their plants in the early morning hours, say between 7 a.m. and 10 a.m. And your plants really, even in the hot summertime, shouldn't be wilted during that period of time. Those are the cool morning hours. And so if you see your plants stressed during that time, you're facing a drought situation, or you're facing a situation where your plants really need some water. And so again, our fact sheets and the resources we have can help you with water management decisions. Here in a minute, I'm going to talk to you about Oklahoma Mesonet and some of the resources available through the Oklahoma Mesonet. Oh, here's the slide. So you might be familiar with Oklahoma Mesonet. If you're not, essentially it is the most sophisticated weather monitoring program, tool that exists out there. In fact, it's kind of envy of countries around the world, and we have it here in Oklahoma. It's a partnership between Oklahoma State University, the University of Oklahoma, and the National Weather Center in Norman, Oklahoma. And so those 3 agencies collectively make it happen. And it was started in 1994 with the idea of collecting thousands of data points in real time every day and using that to help make access available to farmers and ranchers and weather people and landscapers, anybody that would need weather-based information, to have that at their fingertips for decision making. And so there are all sorts of tools that the Mesonet has put together that help you from everything from cattle comfort, knowing, if your cows are might be in distress based on the weather, to determining how much irrigation is going to be needed for certain crops, whether it be pecans or blackberries or whatever. Um, they even have some tools for lawn and landscape chemical applicators who might need to know wind speeds and whether it's safe to apply certain chemicals and when are windows of time where it's safe to do that. And so as a gardener and small acreage owner myself, I use the Mesonet almost every day. I look every day, like in the this time of year when I'm thinking about planting seeds or planting plants in the ground. The soil temperature information can be really, really helpful because we can look at real-time soil temps and we can look back a week or look at those data sets and say, okay, I think we've got soil temps that are appropriate for putting this in the ground. And so I encourage you to get familiar with Oklahoma Mesonet. Any small acreage person looking to be successful is going to be benefited by using the tools available on Mesonet. If you go to the agriculture tab on the Mesonet website, there are a number of the tools that I just mentioned all listed out there, and you can set your location. So if you're in the Tulsa metro area, there's going to be a number of different Mesonet sites. There's usually between 2 and 4 for every county. So you just select the Mesonet site that's closest to you, and then your information will be based on the real time data coming from that Mesonet location. And I think there are somewhere around 3,000 data points that each Mesonet site is collecting. So they're collecting wind speed and temperature and humidity, and they're collecting soil moisture data from everything from like 1 inch all the way down to 36 inches, and soil temperature and all of those things. And so they can be really, really helpful as you make decisions for growing plants or taking care of livestock or whatever. The apps are what I use mainly. You can get online just through mesonet.org, or you can get the app right on your phone, and you can use that information right from your phone app as well. Just some examples here of this is kind of what a from the ground up look of a Mesonet station would look like. And if you ever get the chance to go down to Norman to the National Weather Center and tour, I would encourage you to do that. They've got a Mesonet site kind of example mock site there for display, and it's pretty cool to see. But they're monitoring air temperature, rainfall, humidity, soil moisture, wind speeds, all of those things. So with that, I wanted to leave a little bit of time. I know I a little bit short of the time that we had allotted. I wanted to leave a little bit of time if there's any specific questions from the group, specific to what your goals are with this class or what your goals are for the future. And we could talk about maybe what resources there are to support that, or what might benefit you as you're looking to launch out into whatever it is that you're trying to do.
Josh, I do have one question for you, if you can hear me. As for beginning farmers and ranchers, what do you think is the number one, like most important thing to think about, or the very first step they should take?
That's a really good question. I think for many people on a small acreage, beginning farmers and ranchers, we get excited. We want to do everything, right? We want to have some chickens. We want to have some larger livestock. We're going to grow a big garden. We're going to, do this, do that. And sometimes simplifying and narrowing it down to a few things and doing those really well is the better approach, even though I'm guilty of doing that myself, because so many people burn out when they get onto small acreage, or they're working full time and then also trying to do, kind of weekend warrior type stuff, projects in the evening and weekends. And so simplifying and finding a few things that you can do really well at first and scaling up as you do those well is probably what I would say. also so many people get into it and they're doing it without ever taking advantage of some of the resources I mentioned at the front end of this presentation. So there are grants, there are loans, there are programs and services to support you, even if you're not in it to start a business per se. Maybe you're not wanting to raise eggs for sale at farmers market. Maybe you're just trying to provide eggs for your family. Maybe you're just trying to improve your own, your family's own food security, and you're thinking about it more from the perspective of homesteading on a small acreage. There are plenty of support resources still available to you. And so I think starting with the resources that are out there and really trying to make those connections before you launch off and make some decisions, because oftentimes I'll hear people say, oh, I just spent a bunch of money on this, but I could have used this resource to help with that, or I could have used this resource to help with that. So, yeah, that's what I would say.
Do you guys have any specific questions for him that may pertain to your operation or maybe your operation goals that you might have in the future?
Question I have that gets brought up a lot, we have to do like a business plan,
Uh-huh.
but what about the tax ID or exemption? Is it a positive, a negative?
Were you able to hear that question?
Yeah. Yeah. So the question is about farm tax exemption. Yeah. So that's a confusing topic for many people. For one, many people get confused and think that the Farm Service Agency number is the same thing as the tax number, and it's not. So Farm Service Agency number is your federal registration that makes you eligible for state and federal programs and services available to farmers. The tax registration is through Oklahoma Tax Commission, and that is basically just classifying you as a farm and ranch operation so that you get to take advantage of some of the tax incentives that come along with being a farm and ranch operation. So if you go to the farm store and buy feed for your chickens, or you're buying diesel for a tractor or whatever, you can write that off and not pay certain taxes that you would pay if you were just buying it for a personal expense. The problem is the state of Oklahoma has those tax breaks for farms and ranches available to you if you are a legitimate farm and ranch operation, but it's for the state of Oklahoma to determine whether you're a legitimate operation, right? In the past, there have been lots of people who have gotten it or have tried to get it. In fact, many 4-H and FFA students can get it for their activities that they do, their agricultural projects. But the state of Oklahoma has become a little bit more strict in that they don't want to give tax breaks for farm and ranch operations just to people who are kind of hobbying in their backyard kind of thing. They really are trying to make it something that is for someone who is trying to make a small business. And so the technical requirements are that you can show $1,000 worth of gross receipts annually to qualify. And that's the same for Farm Services Agency to be considered a farm operation, a farm business. It doesn't have to be your primary source of income. It doesn't have to be a quit your job kind of activity. It can be, just a side hustle, but it needs to be $1,000 worth of gross transactions per year to be considered a business. So anything that is not seeing $1,000 worth of money come into your operation, even if you have $20,000 going out in expenses, you need some money coming in as well to be considered a business. And so the tax commission can be a little bit confusing because some people think it's just if I want to garden and grow food for my family, I can get a tax break, and that's not the intent of the tax law. The other thing is they're notorious for kicking people out in their online application if you don't explain that you're a farm business in a way that meets their expectations. And so those are some of the challenges what I found is many people have they've gotten kicked out or their application didn't get approved. And if they can get on the phone with a tax representative at the Oklahoma Tax Commission, and they can walk through the steps that they're able to get it. But it has become a little bit more difficult. So, and that basically is going to allow you to, to save every time you buy feed for the chickens or diesel for the tractor or whatever. Yeah. It also will help as you plan your business when you're determining how you register as an entity. So for many people, if you're just starting out, you're probably just going to operate as a sole proprietor. And if you make any money, you just deal with it when tax season comes. You either don't deal with it, right, and try to do as much cash as you can. I think a lot of people try to operate that way because they don't want to have to deal with or even think about taxes. But really, you come to a point where you're really well served by thinking about, maybe I need to set up a small LLC, or maybe I need to actually put some structure to my business and then start filing a Schedule F on my taxes, et cetera. And so when you get to that point, we have those resources available to you that kind of help you think through some of those decisions and when you need to do that. If you're just hobby farming and, maybe you're selling some eggs here and there off farm, but it's just kind of sporadic and you don't really have a formal plan to make money from anything that you're doing, operating as a sole proprietor is probably the way to go. It simplifies things. But if you are really trying to put some concerted effort into, I'm going to produce some eggs and I'm going to sell them and I want to set up at this farmer's market on the weekend, you really need to think about how you structure your business.
When it comes to filing for a tax exemption, is the only regulation on there, the only thing required, the $1,000 gross sales? Are there any acreage limiters or anything like that on there?
Not to my knowledge. If you have prior Schedule Fs or farm tax paperwork, you'll pretty much automatically get tax exemption. Where people have problem getting tax exemption is if they are brand new to farming, they don't have any previous history to show that they've been a farm ranch operator. And so then it's basically comes down to the narrative that they tell to explain what they're trying to do. But if you have prior history, you can very easily get through that process. But like any government agency, sometimes it's a little bit cumbersome and you have to get on the phone and get somebody to kind of help you through it. So.
Do you have any other questions? And if you can't think of any questions right now, that's okay. We're always a resource here for you guys if you have any other questions. I did have one other question for you. You touched a little bit on some of the challenges beginning farmers and ranchers might face. What other challenges have you encountered as a state specialist and a previous urban county ag educator? What other challenges have you seen?
That's a good question. Lots and lots and lots of challenges. I mean, it kind of depends on what you're doing too, the scope and the scale of what you're doing. There's less infrastructure when it comes to small acreage stuff. If we're talking about trying to, grow food for farmers market sales or grow, when we start talking about small acreage things, there's less of a safety network, I guess is the way to put it. And so any one thing that goes wrong can be devastating. And I think that's why a lot of people really struggle their first 4 or 5 years in any operation, and why the USDA has really recognized the need to invest in supporting beginning farmers, which are people who are in the first 10 years of their operation. And so there are so many challenges, but I think I've seen everything from people racking up a bunch of credit card debt to get started to, having some sort of storm come through and they don't have insurance to support replacing what was lost. And so those are all risks that that should be mitigated on the front end with your plan. And so that's why I think it's so important for planning to be done, and we can help you through a lot of that if you come to us, and not just OSU Extension, but other agencies. Oklahoma Career Tech offers services where any of the career tech sites across the state, you can sit down with their their farm specialist and walk through a plan and come up with some key steps to set yourself up for success and mitigate some of those risks. I would say one of the biggest things you can do is just meet other people who are trying to do similar things and network with them. And that's why the Oklahoma Local Ag Collaborative can be really helpful. It's a great way to meet people across the state who are doing similar things, can share resources, can share where they've screwed up and overcome, challenges that maybe you don't have to make those same mistakes if you can learn from some of those mistakes that they've made. So yeah, that's what I would say. I would also say I'm continuing to build my program out. So I would say if some things come through by the end of this year or early next year, we'll offer some potentially some opportunities to come have some hands-on learning on campus at OSU at the student farm and do some really cool things. So if there's a specific area of interest or something that you need support in or need help in, you can let Hannah know, and she can pass that information along to people who can help provide some resources.
If you guys don't have any other questions, we can let Josh go and continue on with his day. And we'll get started with our hands-on activity. Again, I just want to thank you, Josh, for talking to us today. That is a lot of good information, especially for me as a new educator. A lot of good new things to think about for me, but I think a lot of things for them to think about too going forward. And if you guys do think of any questions later on, we've got his contact information on the PowerPoint as well as mine and the other PowerPoint that I have. So if you have any questions, feel free to reach out to us and we can find some help for you.
Yeah, thanks for sitting through an hour and a half with me, or an hour or so, and I like to kind of take a flyover and just shoot you with a lot of information, and hopefully something from today was helpful. And like Hannah said, you can reach out through her to me anytime. And sorry I wasn't there in person with you, but maybe next time.
Yes. Thank you so much. I hope you have a good rest of your afternoon.
You too. Enjoy those charcuterie boards. Is that happening?
Yes, that's what we're going to do next.
Okay. The good stuff is next. All right. Bye-bye.
Thank you. See ya.
Yeah.